In 1793, the eggs of a yellow fever-carrying mosquito were accidentally brought to the U.S. on slave ships. For nearly a century, yellow fever epidemics got increasingly worse, ending with the tragic epidemic of 1878.
Throughout the epidemic, a team of scientists led by Walter Reed worked tirelessly to discover the source of yellow fever. As a result, the infectious mosquitoes were triumphantly eradicated with mosquito control, and a preventative vaccine was eventually created by Max Thieler in 1951.
Yellow fever arrived in the U.S. in 1793 when slave ships carried the diseased eggs of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, the transmitter of the disease. Slaves on the slave ships were practically immune to the disease because most of them had already had the disease before coming to the U.S. While they were immune, white individuals were getting sick because they never had the disease, most likely because of America's mostly mild climate. The Aedes aegypti mosquito was native to tropical and subtropical climates, hence its African origin.
The mosquitoes mostly affected the areas along the Mississippi River because of where they lay their eggs. For almost a century, yellow fever epidemics worsened until it reached 1878. The fever was a tragic experience for victims and survivors. Once a person caught the virus, they had a 5 to 20% chance of developing yellow fever. Some of the early signs of yellow fever were chills and body aches, mild fevers, puffy white spots on the tongue, headaches, nausea, and exhaustion. It also had a unique symptom called Faggot sign that, unlike other illnesses, caused a high fever and a slow heart rate.
Some cases of yellow fever ended after these symptoms went away for a few hours in a phase called remission, and the victim would live. In other cases, the fever would progress after remission and cause its most famous symptoms. The virus continued on to harm the liver, turning a victim's skin and eyes yellow in a symptom called jaundice. In addition to jaundice, the failing liver would also cause internal bleeding, and the victim would eventually vomit the digested blood. This was known as black vomit. As long as there was no cure, the only hope the people of Memphis had was winter.
They knew that the virus would go away when cold temperatures came, but they didn't know why. In towns, armed men would stop people from coming into their town because they came from a yellow fever diseased town. These were called shotgun quarantines. Fairs for the yellow fever patients often occurred too. There were also charities and refugee camps during the times of yellow fever. Cartoonists created a character called Yellow Jack that would be dragging down the states and the people.
Walter Reed, looking for an opportunity to help in the field of medicine, went and studied bacteriology, a new field at the time. Reed also read all the latest medical books and theories that scientists had. Then, Reed got what he wanted most, an opportunity. He was ordered by the U.S. Army to go to Cuba in 1900, along with 3 other scientists, James Carroll, Jesse Lazier, and Aristides Argamonte, to discover the cause of the virus. The team would be conducting experiments and solving mysteries that would determine how yellow fever would be treated and how the patients could protect themselves against it.
Before they could do that, they would have to take the project theory by theory and prove one wrong and one right. Carlos Finlay, a Cuban scientist, had a crazy idea, or that was how other scientists put it. He thought that maybe humans weren't the ones spreading the devastating disease. Instead, his theory stated that a specific mosquito was spreading it. When he introduced his theory, the world laughed. Not quiet giggles that you wouldn't notice, but instead uproarious laughter booming into the face of Finlay. Finlay conducted experiments testing his theory, but the results weren't satisfactory. He needed someone to prove the world wrong.
Meanwhile, Walter Reed and his team met in Havana, Cuba, where they would be conducting most of their experiments and taking care of patients. The first theory that Reed's team would prove was Sandarelli's bacteria theory. A bacteria called Bacillus icteroides was said to have caused the disease, but as the team was experimenting, They were doubting that this could have worked. Then, a prisoner in a guardhouse got yellow fever and died. But how did he get it? He hadn't touched the prisoners that were with him, and although he touched the blankets others slept on, he couldn't have gotten it from them. How did he contract the disease? It wasn't Bacillus ictoroides, that much was clear. After weeks of work, the team had found no evidence that Santarelli's bacteria had anything to do with yellow fever. That eliminated one theory, according to the book Yellow Death.
Then, Reed and his team drove up to Finlay's house in Cuba to ask him about his theory. While everyone else was mooning over the bacteria, Jesse Lazier was thinking about bugs. The team asked about the theory, and Finlay told them how to conduct the experiments. He gave Lazier the bugs, and he was to feed them an experiment. Once the mosquitoes were healthy, he tested them out on patients. Lazier put the mosquitoes on the arms, letting them be pricked, but the results weren't clear because the patients already had yellow fever. Carroll saw his partner was glum and volunteered to test it out because he really didn't believe in the mosquito theory. Then, while swimming with another doctor, Carroll got sick. He was in the hospital and had a case of yellow fever. The whole team was worried for Carroll, but a new opportunity popped up. Private William Dean was the perfect candidate because he was young and healthy and had never had yellow fever. Dean didn't think the theory would prove anything, and after all, it was a harmless mosquito, right?
It was September 5th, 1900 when he showed symptoms of yellow fever. Jesse Lazier was busy trying to prove whether Dean's case was an accident when he too was bitten by a mosquito on September 13th. He died on September 25th, 1900 at the age of 34. Reed wanted an experiment to settle the debate once and for all. He had 2 cabins built, Building 1 and Building 2. One cabin housed a few people that had to sleep in blankets that had been used by yellow fever victims and was protected from mosquitoes. The other was completely clean, but did not protect the people from mosquitoes. All of the people in the mosquito-protected cabin stayed healthy, and everyone in the mosquito-infested cabin got yellow fever.
Reed wasn't satisfied. He did one more experiment, including an open-air cabin with a wire screen in the middle. Some volunteers stayed on the side of the cabin with mosquitoes, and the other volunteers stayed on the side without bugs. All of the people on the mosquito-free side stayed healthy, and the people on the bug-inclusive side got yellow fever. The theory was confirmed. Aedes aegypti caused yellow fever by transmitting it through a bite.
In the years after the breakthrough, scientist Max Thieler worked hard to find a cure to yellow fever. Thieler conducted several experiments on mice and monkeys. In 1951, Max Thieler released 17D, the preventative vaccine that's still in use today. He received a Nobel Prize for creating the vaccine and testing it on himself. Unfortunately, there's no cure for yellow fever once a person contracts the disease. The scientist's hard work gave relief from the fear of dreaded disease and a way to prevent it. An estimated 17,500 cases were reported, 16,000 lives had been taken by the fever, and economic losses climbed to at least $100 million.
Congress created the National Board of Health to assist in public health emergencies, but it failed in 1883. The city of New Orleans created a sanitary code to tell nurses exactly how to treat the last few yellow fever patients. Cities started opening again. Neighbors trusted one another. Mosquito control began eradicating Aedes aegypti from the USA by spraying oil on mosquito breeding grounds. The U.S. was once again a bustling country.
One of the major impacts and triumphs of the epidemic of 1878 is the vaccine that still protects us today. Anyone traveling to parts of Africa and South America is required to receive a yellow fever vaccine. We also have the epidemic to thank for mosquito control. Today we have planes and helicopters to spray mosquito poison over large areas, but the handheld oiled sprayers worked to control the mosquito population after the epidemic. As of 2019, the work of Walter Reed's team and the vaccine 17D still protects us from the tragic yellow fever.